Welcome to this week's Game of Thrones discussion. I'm Brian McBalls, joined with Jordan Wade.
Hey guys, man, Brian, I'm excited about this week. So
Yes,
yeah,
indeed. And I want to start first. I guess we skipped a week. We didn't do a review for episode 9, The Watchers on the Wall. And that's a mixture of reasons. We had a schedule conflict. There was E3 stuff going on, and other personal reasons going on my side. So we ended up recording one for that. So we're doing that this week. We're talking about episode 9 and 10 together. And so I'm going to go ahead and say spoiler warnings for if you have not seen the entirety of Game of Thrones Season 4, you want to back out now. We will be discussing Season 4 in its entirety, so you want to back out. And that goes for Storm of Swords spoilers as well. If it has not happened in the show, we will not touch on it, but we will be comparing book events to show events. So without further ado, let's do this. Episode 9, Watchers on the Wall. And this is essentially the Blackwater of Season 4, because it's one huge battle that takes place at the wall, and the entire episode is based on these characters and what's going on in the north. You want to go ahead and get us started on this? Give us some setup, Jordan?
yeah. This was an anticipated episode, obviously, being that we've had foreshadowing for this since season 3, with Mance Rayder and the Wildlings eventually coming to the wall, and then of course Egret and the Wildlings in the south on the other side. So we knew this was going to be coming to a head. And it was nice to see that they dedicated a whole episode to this, because there's just no way you could do it justice by, giving it a 15-minute segment in one episode and a 15-minute segment in the other. It needed a whole episode to really, hammer it home. And I'm going to have to say, budget on this episode. This was an absolutely visually stunning episode, probably the most visually stunning episode we'd seen. Blackwater was obviously the bar that was set beforehand, and we didn't have large scale stuff of this, obviously this magnitude in season 3. So it was kind of nice to have a little change of pace with this episode and solely focus on Jon Snow and the Wall, and also Sam as well. Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't want to spend too much time on this episode, mainly because I feel like it was pretty straightforward. It was a battle, but I do want to touch on some differences that occurred between the book and the show. And first of all, I want to talk about the setup of this huge fight. In the books, it is not just one fight. It actually takes place over several chapters, several days, and it's actually 2 battles, not just one. And to set that up, I'll say that Battle 1 was a smaller scale battle, which was fought on the south side of the wall, which was Egret, Tormund. Actually, Tormund didn't come south in the books. So it was Egret and the wildlings she came up with. And they fought at the south side of the wall. The pacing is much different. I'll say this because you remember how Jon took several arrow shot wounds from Egret in the show?
Yes.
And the funny thing is he didn't have any battle. He had no injury, lasting injury. He just kind of stepped back up and he's in fighting form immediately. And that was kind of weird to me, but I could tell they just didn't want to have a limping Kit Harington this season. So in the book, things are more expedient. When he gets shot up with arrows, he rides straight north. He goes to Molestown first on the way up to Castle Black, and he warns Molestown. He's like, "Hey, look, wildlings are coming. You need to leave." And most of Molestown evacuates and actually goes to the wall to be with the Night's Watch. And they also help defend the wall. So anyways, this happens really quick, and Jon makes it in time to explain what's going on, and they start getting ready for the battle pretty much. And so the south side wall is fought, and Jon doesn't actually fight on the ground. He's not there to sword fight. He's actually posted on a tower shooting arrows because he's limping. He can't really fight. He can't productively fight with a sword at that point. So that's one major difference. Jon he's injured at the time of the battle. And anyways, they went out the south side battle. And there's some confusion from Jon's side. He's shooting wildlings from a distance on a tower, and for a moment he fears that he actually shot Ygritte because he sees a red-haired person and he shoots that he shoots that way, and he's like, oh shit, I think I just shot Ygritte, and then, like, he's worrying about that during the battle as he's things are playing out. And anyways, the battle is fought, the battle is won, and what ends up happening is Ygritte's death happens after the battle. Jon goes down to look amongst the dead and see what's going on, the aftermath of the fight. And he finds Ygritte there, and she's dying, and that's where they have their last words. And so you kind of get a more intimate goodbye, because it's not in the heat of the battle they say goodbye, it's after the fight. And after that, I mean, so her last words are, "You know nothing, Jon Snow." That actually plays out the same way it did in the book. It's just the timing's a little different and the setting of it.
Yeah, and the setting, obviously, it sounds way better in the book, because in the show, it was a little odd to have, and it was a tender moment, but it was odd to see Jon Snow in the midst of a battle bend down and grab Ygritte and have these final words with her while people are fighting around them. It seemed a little odd that some wildling going to be like, "Hey, there's a crow on a knee down there. I'm just going to go ahead and stab him in the back because he's not doesn't have his guard up." It was a little odd. I understand it's television, but the whole time I'm sitting there thinking, why aren't you ready to fight? I understand this is sad, but there are people killing each other around you. Why are you taking this moment? But it is what it is, and it wasn't horrible, but it was one of the more unintentionally corny moments, I think, in the show.
Yeah, well, it didn't feel like completely tight that he did that, like ironclad plot. Like he could have been stabbed in the back while he was kneeling or whatever.
Yeah.
But whatever. Yeah. Pip and Grin. Let's talk about them. They're actually obviously minor characters, but I think they're more important in the books, just because there's more time to develop these guys. And they are Jon's good friends at the Watch. Do you recall much of them? Like, did they stand out in your head at all?
Yeah, I mean, because they were always at his side. Which one had the beard?
That's Gren.
Okay. Grant, yeah, and going back to, was it season 1 that we met them, and they were giving... Were they the ones giving Sam crap when he was trying to fight and stuff like that, and they kind of all came together, obviously, and became kind of this group? So yeah, it was sad for me to see Gren die, just because, not that we had a lot of time with him in the show, but there were some of those key moments, and he was always with Jon from season 1 onward, and they always bought into Jon, and they were a tight group of friends. So it was sad to see him die, and also was a very heroic moment, obviously, because Jon told him to go hold the tunnel, and he held the tunnel. And so that was good. So it was sad to see him die. Now Pip didn't die, right? He was stationed still at the top of the wall, and he kind of led the archers at that point, right?
That was Dolorous Ed.
Oh.
Yeah, Dolorous Ed.
Okay, Pip is the one that was freaked out when and Sam was trying to boost up his confidence, right? And he ends up getting shot by Ygritte. Okay.
Yep. And yeah. So they don't die in the books. They're actually still alive in current books. Like, so It was interesting that they killed them. But I think it's because the cast. I mean, this is a huge cast of characters, and I could see where at some points where if they don't think they're going to do much with the character for the show, that they might kill them off to reduce budget, I don't know.
Yeah.
And maybe they did it also to make it more emotional, to make it a more emotional fight.
Yeah, because if Gren would have walked out of that battle with the giant alive, it would have seemed a little over the top. Like,
yeah, hard to believe. Yeah.
Yeah, there's no way that those 4 or 5 guys would have taken out a giant in close quarters and lived to tell about it. So, I mean, it's shocking to me to hear that both Pip and Gren are still alive in the books, but yeah. I think you could have kept them around, but then again, the actors probably would have wanted to have, I think you could have written them out. They do write out characters occasionally, they do write them out and kind of write them off into the background. But I guess that just shows how little time we'll be spending at the wall going forward, I suppose.
Well, it also we can go into Well, that's episode 10, but
Yes.
I did want to say one difference in the book is that the giant fight is actually with a book character named, what was his name? It was the blacksmith at the wall.
Okay.
And the blacksmith is actually the one who dies, not Gren. But it's just they combined that trait into Gren, and they gave him that scene. So overall, I like what they did because the blacksmith wasn't introduced in the show.
Yeah.
So it played out nicely. I like what they did with it.
And you very well couldn't just introduce a red shirt, borrowing from Star Trek terms. You couldn't just introduce a red shirt in this episode and be like, "I'm gonna go hold the wall for you, hold the tunnel for you, John." And then he dies, and it'd be like, "Okay, well, I never saw him before. It kind of makes sense that he would just die in this episode." So.
It wouldn't have had a little emotional tinge to it if it was some random guy.
Right.
At first, I was predicting they were going to give Alistair Thorne that death.
Okay.
I thought he was going to be the one to go in the tunnels and fight the giants.
Now, does he actually die in this battle in the book?
Alistair Thorne is not even here for the battle in the books. Him and Jano Slint are not yet at the wall at this point.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa.
And Sam Tarley's not there either. So there's a lot that's different. Actually, what ends up happening, and we could segue into this. At the end of the episode, John basically says, "All right, look, we have no other options. We're going to be overrun eventually. I'm going to go try and assassinate Mance Rayder."
Yeah.
And he decides to do this on his own. In the books, what happens is, they're fending off the wall for a bit, and they're actually fending off the wall for days. It's more of a battle of attrition more than like a one-night thing. Like, there's constantly people trying to come at the wall in like waves, and they're trying to like get and break through the gates. And it's basically a long battle of them fending it off with arrows, boiling pitch or whatever. They're throwing like they do this one thing where they have these barrels and they fill them with like rocks, like a bunch of little rocks, and then they pour water in and it freezes the rocks all together in one huge barrel of ice cube, and they're throwing those down to like crush people.
Yeah. Brutal.
Yeah, it's pretty good stuff. But yeah, it's a long battle of attrition, and they're taking turns sleeping at the posts. And there's also this little moment I wish they had included, but I guess they didn't have time, or maybe wouldn't have made as much sense on screen. But what they do is they set up like fake dummy like scarecrow men on top of the wall to make it look like there's more people manning the wall. And so the enemy archers are shooting at all these. They don't know if it's a real guy or not. So they act as a decoy, but also it kind of boosts their morale because it makes them seem like they have more people. And they're like playing this game of like they name their dummies and they're talking about they just shot Bob. It's pretty funny, but it was good stuff. But anyways, I gotta say one thing though. I think the kill of the episode was definitely the giant archer. Like, I thought that was hilarious.
Yes.
Even though,
my gosh.
Even though it's a little over the top, I think it was a fun kill. It was something interesting to see,
Yeah, I mean, they didn't really do anything with it after that. I mean, the Giants didn't really find the arrows after that, but it was still it was a cool moment just because it showed the scale of the giant and how an arrow for a giant would be compared to a normal man. So it was cool. It was one of those. It was definitely one of the moment where I dropped a holy shit or something like that. When you just see the guy flying over the wall. I was just like, you think like, man, what a way to go! Just like this giant, tree trunk of an arrow flying at you. Just it was a feast for the eyes to see.
I'm gonna give a shout out to the cook, Three Finger Hob. They I think that's his name, the Three Finger Hob. Anyway, Hob, the cook. You see him come out later in the episode, and he's got this giant cleaver. Did you see that? Did you see that guy?
I think so.
He was there briefly. He came up with his huge cleaver, and I just thought it looked badass. He's cutting people down with like a huge like butcher's cleaver. It's like it was like really long. Like, I thought it was cool.
Okay.
And yeah, at the end of the episode, John goes out by his own will, and he's going to try and assassinate Mance Rayder. What I was going to say is different in the books is that Alistair Thorne and Jano Slint don't arrive until like after a few days after the battle's been going on, and they find John and they're like, "Hey, look, he's back." They hear what Maester Aemon says about John pretending to be a wildling, yada yada, And Jano Slint and Alistair Thorne take it upon themselves because they don't like John. They're like, well, he's a traitor. He's obviously a traitor. We need to get rid of him. So to test your loyalty, John, we're going to lower you down, and you're going to have to go treat with Mance. They're basically trying to kill him. Like
Okay.
that's their intent. They're basically going to send him down to be killed by the wildlings because they don't think a treaty's going to work. So John goes down, and he's really torn because I think he grew to respect the wildlings a great deal with his time with them. He really thinks Mance is a really good person. Tormund Giantsbane, obviously Gret, and so it's a tough decision for him. And now I guess we can just segue into episode 10 now.
Well, I just wanted to drop one last tidbit, and when you brought up Maester Aemon, it reminded me. It was just a little drop there. It wasn't a huge deal as far as the whole grand scheme of things, but it was interesting to hear that Master Aemon was a Targaryen. This whole time we think Daenerys is sort of I mean, he wasn't direct line to the throne. He was probably like an uncle to Daenerys or a distant cousin or something like that. But
that's a big one to discuss because it's different from the books. They've essentially eliminated an entire generation of Targaryens that are just omitted in the show. Okay. And rather than go into those details, because the Targaryen family tree is pretty detailed business to talk about.
Sure.
Maester Aemon, he could have been king of Westeros. He had the option to be, but he passed it to his beloved younger brother. His name is Aegon. And what ends up happening is you can tell that Maester Aemon has a what's the word for it? He took his oath seriously. When he signed up to be a maester, he didn't backtrack out and leave his maesterhood to become king. He takes his oath seriously. He's a good man. He's a man of his word. And so that's how that played out. And yeah, he is a Targaryen. That's actually revealed in season 1, if you don't remember that. He tells that to Jon in season 1.
Oh, completely forgot about it. It was news to me, but I completely forgot about it for whatever reason.
It is a quick conversation, so I can understand how it's quick. And especially they don't bring it up since season 1 either, so it's easy to believe that you would forget it.
And also at the time, the name didn't mean as much to me as it does now because I was just getting into the show, and now that I know how the different houses are and everything, it hit harder this time to hear it from him.
Yeah. And so, let's segue to episode 10, Jon treating with Mance. What is your? Why don't you tell me what you thought about this part of the episode?
Well, it's interesting that Jon was able to just safely get his way to Mance Rayder's tent, but he did, and which is fine. But yeah, they have the conversation, and it's Cillian Hines, or I think that's how you pronounce his name, the actor that plays Mance. He's fantastic, and
he's awesome.
He's amazing. I was introduced to him watching the film Munich back like in 2005, and he was a very quiet character in that movie. But it was so cool to see him play such a big character in this show, and we haven't seen him since last season. So it was cool to finally, because he's a guy that you hear more about than you actually see, and he's become a legend even to a television watcher, and it was cool to see that moment. It was a great back and forth conversation. Obviously, Jon was trying to find ways to assassinate Mance Rayder, and Mance figuring him out pretty quick. I think Mance knew from the word go that Jon, he didn't completely trust a treaty, but it was interesting little interchange. But yeah, it was nice.
So what we get is Jon treating with Mance, and he's trying to. I guess he's doing the same thing was in the book. He's trying to reach a treaty or like a peaceful resolution. Like he gives him a chance. He's like, well, why don't your people just turn north and go back to your homes and no one else has to die? And then Mance basically says, well, hey, look, there's only 2 things that are going to happen here. He's like, I already have people climbing the walls, a couple hundred miles down the line where there's no one holding the wall. He's like, they're gonna come over and they're gonna come take the place in a couple days, or one way or the other, we're gonna come to the other side of that wall. Is what he basically said.
Yeah.
And in the middle of this meeting that they are interrupted by Stannis the Manus.
Okay, well, first of all, I just want to say I couldn't see the sigil clearly, and there was a moment where I thought it was actually from the Vale. I actually thought that it was a possibility that this was a military riding in from the Vale, because you've driven home throughout the season that the military in the Vale is rested. They have not been in war and stuff like that. And I thought that maybe it was possibly another play by Littlefinger, but it actually makes more sense that Stannis would be there other than Littlefinger. We haven't seen him for a few episodes. I do think it seems a little bit convenient that he got there so quick, but regardless, he rode in and he saved the day, and they made mincemeat of the wildlings, even though they're, as you told me, their numbers were significantly less, obviously, with Stannis' army compared to the wildling forces, but they're a trained military on horseback, and the way they just rode through the trees crisscrossing, that was pretty amazing to watch.
Yeah, no, it's great. I love the way how they did the mounted knights coming in. It looked great, the heavy charge, but I have a one big issue, and that's something that they didn't show the extent of the wildling army. Like, you hear him say that he has 100,000. But it's only a mention. You never see a huge shot with like this gigantic wildling horde.
Mm-hmm.
So I think in a way it kind of belittles this victory, because it's supposed to show how disciplined and how tactical Stannis is, that he wins this battle with 4,000 men versus 100,000. Like, he makes the wildlings surrender. He's outnumbered like 100 to 1, and he wins out the battle. So yeah, I mean, I think it was belittled. I wish they would have had like one shot of like the tree line, and like hundreds of thousands of men in the with torches or something.
Yeah, yeah,
Something like that.
yeah. I understand that. I just think that in the interest of budget and rendering times, I'm sure they're like, we're just gonna have them hiding in this forest of having 100,000 people hiding in these trees, I guess. But it was still an amazing feat to see, and we see Stannis ride up, and it was a moment where you felt Stannis was a man of power. I mean, more power than he's had in the entirety of the show. And it's sad to say, but he was confident. He even asked Jon Snow. Jon defends Mance in that moment because Mance was probably going to be captured and tortured, and Jon stands up and says, "This guy captured me, and he could have tortured or killed me, but he didn't. He showed me kindness." And Jon reveals that in that moment before, that he is Ned Stark's bastard son. So Stannis asks him, "What would your father do?" And of course Jon says that his dad would probably bring him in, question him, and that's it. And that was kind of nice. And Stannis wasn't. I thought that Stannis would be like, "No, screw that. He's wrong. I'm going. I don't care what your father thinks." But Stannis was an honorable man and said, "Okay." And we see, Mance taken away, and that was interesting.
That's one thing I love about this part, where Stannis meets Jon, and he knows that Jon is Ned's bastard son, and that I like that while Stannis and Eddard Stark were not good friends,
Yeah.
they respected each other. They had a mutual respect for each other, and I love that Stannis acknowledges that, and I love how Jon even says that my father died trying to secure your throne, because that's what it is. If you remember back to season 1, Eddard wanted Stannis to succeed. I mean, succeed. He wanted Stannis to take the throne.
Right, because Joffrey wasn't a legitimate heir. Joffrey wasn't even a Baratheon.
Yeah.
And yeah, so and Ned, knowing that, tried to secure the throne. So yeah, it was interesting to see stuff sort of come full circle. This little things that just kind of come crisscrossing back.
Yeah. And yeah, I'm so happy Stannis is at the wall now, because some of my favorite story, like I just love Stannis and Jon, their dialogue together. I expect funny things between those two, just because I think you'll finally, if the show writers finally get Stannis right, they will include his little like like quick. He's got these really like stern, I don't even know, like witty comebacks. Like he's kind of funny in a way. It's really funny to read, like to see how he deals with people.
Hmm.
And so I don't know. I think we can look forward to a lot of good dialogue next season.
But also what I want to go into is that the reasoning why Stannis is there, because it could be somewhat confusing as to why he would come all the way north to protect the wall. And I'm assuming it's because if he can't get the throne, through legitimate means, he might as well become, I'm assuming, a hero by holding the wall and protecting the south from what's coming from the north. I mean, am I far off from this?
No, that's about the gist of it. And what it is Melisandre has the vision that the great battle will happen in the north. You know, she sees it in her flames that there will be a battle in the north with the whites. You know, she basically sees that.
Hmm.
And that happens in season 2 or 3. I think it's the end of season 2 that happened. There's the last episode of season 2 after Blackwater when Stannis is defeated and he's licking his wounds, and she has Stannis look in the flames, and she's like, "What do you see?" And then that's when she talks about the great battle will happen in the north. So you know.
Okay, yes. I mean, I remember her saying that. I couldn't remember if it was the end of season 2 or within season 3, but I guess it would be at the end of season 2 that occurred.
And so yeah, we've known for a little bit that they're kind of aware of that, and now it's finally. It took them a whole season to get there, but they got there. And yeah, there's a quote that I wish was included. I sent it to you earlier today.
Mm-hmm.
It's a quote about Stannis saying, "You know, Davos Seaworth is a humble man, but he reminded me of my duty." He says, "I was only concerned about my rights, but I was not concerned about my duty." And he's like, "I was putting the cart before the horse." He's like, "I have a duty as king of Westeros to defend it." And so he goes north, and he sees the north thing as the true threat. And
Yeah.
that's something important about his character, is that while everybody else is squabbling for the Iron Throne, essentially, he's recognized what's going on up north. So it's a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's gone up north. We get a scene where they're burning their dead. They're giving a big funeral, and there's some foreshadowing there, I guess. I love that little scene of Melisandre and Jon staring at each other through the flames.
Well, yeah, just the shot itself, that the fact that the introduction to Melisandre in this scene is through flames, and as a woman who deals specifically with flames, it was a nice shot, and we know that she has the ability to take out heirs to certain thrones, or at least try to. Even bastards. She will take out illegitimate children as well, and you have to worry about Jon Snow's well-being going forward if Melisandre's around, because even though Eddard Stark wasn't trying to be a king, Robb was considered a king, and Jon Snow is the bastard brother to Robb, so he's not exactly safe being around Melisandre.
Yeah, it's good stuff coming. We'll leave it up to interpretation because obviously we don't know anything about what's going to happen yet. And now we also get a scene with Jon speaking with Tormund,
Yes.
a defeated Tormund who is treated by their maester. And yeah, he's kind of questioning what they have in store for him. Like he thinks they're going to torture him or something. But I mean, like I said, Jon really came to respect the wildlings. And I don't know if that came through well on the screen for the show watchers. Like, did you ever kind of get that notion that he came to respect a lot of these guys?
I felt that he did initially. It was, I guess, during the course of the season. I mean, you knew that his love for Ygritte still burned. I mean, you knew that was still a big part of him, even though he wasn't showing it quite as much as she was. As Tormund said, she was constantly talking about killing him. That's how he knew that she was madly in love with Jon. You knew that Ygritte just wanted to get to Jon. She thought in her mind she was going to kill him, but she knew deep down that she wasn't. She just wanted to get to him. And I knew that Jon loved her, but I don't know if I knew that. I think it was somewhat apparent, but it wasn't like something that was really driven home. But it did make sense that he does have respect for the wildlings because of the goodwill that Mance showed to him initially. I think that he does hold respect. He could have been killed off while he was up north, but he wasn't.
And it's kind of the point's kind of driven home to him. Like he starts to understand that the wildlings are not the true enemy of the Night's Watch. The Night's Watch was originally established to deal with the others and the White Walkers. Like
Yes.
that's the original purpose of the Wall. It's just that over the centuries, the White Walkers and the others have been missing or gone. So the Wall has kind of become like a border patrol for wildlings, essentially. When that was not its original purpose, like. So I think John, that point is really driven home to him. It becomes clear to him that these are just people who are north. They're on the wrong side of the wall.
Yeah,
And
and
yeah,
as this conversation with Mance showed, Mance said that they're not there to try to take over anything. They're simply just trying to get south for safety. That is the whole point of their hitting the wall. And that's when I felt maybe that was more driven home to John, that they're not there to hurt. They're there for safety. They're not there to conquer.
yep. And so yeah, Tormund. I think they kind of John tries to basically mend things with Tormund. He's like, yeah, hey, I don't know what's gonna happen with you just yet. I have no idea. But he's like, no hard feelings. It's kind of like he's trying to mend the bridge between them.
Yeah.
Uh, John, he burns Egret's body. It's a little kind of a emotional moment.
Yeah.
Says his goodbye, pretty much. His the only woman he ever loved. So it's a big thing for John that happened. I think.
Oh yeah, yeah, and it was what he didn't hang around very long, obviously, because it was a hard thing for him to take. But I think the saddest thing also is that it's the last time we're gonna see Rose Leslie on the show, and her
Yeah,
presence.
she was great.
She was, and her presence will be missed, and just another actor that's been fun to watch that we will no longer see on this show. But now we'll move into another part of the land, actually farther south in Westeros, King's Landing to be exact, and we jump into Cersei. This is very early on in the episode. We see her with two maesters huddling over the body of the mountain, and he's not dead yet. He isn't dead yet. I suspected that he wasn't dead, but he's not exactly in a good place. And Brian, this wasn't apparent to me, but apparently he had been poisoned, I guess, in the fight with Oberyn.
Yep. The show actually revealed this point. I think I alluded to it in episode 8. I wasn't trying to be overtly spoiling it. I don't think. I might be recalling this wrong. I knew he was poisoned, obviously, but the show didn't make it completely clear. Like, you get to see a point where his squire is like wiping the spear blade before the fight. Did you see that?
I mean, I'd have to go back and look, but it wasn't something I was looking for at the time. It just looked like something that would be normal for a bat,
Yeah.
prior to a one-on-one fight.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're right. But yeah, it is made 100% clear in this episode. The Maesters are basically saying, yeah, he was poisoned with manticore venom, and it's basically going to make him It's going to give him a slow, agonizing death. And Maester Pycelle is basically like, oh, he's done. Why are we even trying to treat this guy? And Quiburn, and I don't know if you remember Qyburn. Do you remember where Qyburn came from?
I know he's treated Jamie so far
Yeah.
with his hand.
Yep.
Was that his first appearance in the show?
So Qyburn was at what's the name of that place? Well, I can't remember the name of that place. The huge like burnt area where Arya spent some time. Why can't I remember the name of this place?
Part of the Riverlands, obviously.
Yeah, it's in the Riverlands. I can't believe I forgot the name of this place. It's like on the edge of my tongue, and I can't think of it. Jamie went there to save Brienne from the bear.
Yes.
You don't know? I can't believe. I need to look this up now. It's driving me nuts. I should know the name of this place.
I don't know either. There's so many names that are thrown at me in the show. I don't know if I can help you out there. But that was his first appearance with him mending Jamie's hand after he had lost it, right?
Yes, and that's where they met. They met at this place, and Qyburn was kind of in Roose Bolton's service, and this was, where is it? I'm reading. Harrenhal.
Oh crap! Why can't I think of that either? I was thinking
I feel like awful that I didn't like get that. Like I should know the name of that. But yeah, Harrenhal, where all these people cross paths pretty much, and yeah, Qyburn came from there, and yeah, his origin is that he was a maester that had his chain taken away from him because he liked to experiment with people pretty much.
Yeah, work on people that weren't and experiment on people that weren't exactly dead, right? He was
Yeah,
doing it all, but he his motives weren't evil. His motives were simply for science, but people didn't, being that you're practicing on live bodies, people are not going to exactly uh, not exactly going to agree with all of his practices.
yeah. So his chain was removed for that reason, and Qyburn basically speaks up. He's like, "Hey, look, um, I can save this man. You know, I can treat him. I can make him live." But he won't. He basically says, "But he won't be the same when I'm done with him." And then Cersei's like, "Will he be weaker?" And he's like, "Oh no, he'll still be strong." And she's like, "Okay, whatever, do it." So yeah, she pretty much gave Qyburn, save the mountain by whatever means necessary. So that's the end of that scene, pretty much. That's all we can really take from that.
Yeah,
And there's a lot of Cersei in this episode, and now we've kind of briefly mentioned this earlier. I don't necessarily agree that they should have had this much Cersei, but next her scene is with Tywin, and you want to go ahead and establish this scene?
yeah. Cersei doesn't. This whole season, Cersei has said, "I'm not going to marry Loras. It's not going to happen. I have no interest in marrying Loras. It's not going to happen." And Tywin kept on reiterating, since last season, like, "No, you will be marrying Loras. That's it. That's final. You will do what's right for your family and the family's name and for the kingdom." And she continues to defy him and say, "I won't happen." And realizing that she is at a point where she can't beat her father, she decides to pull out the card out of the deck we never thought she'd pull out for in front of her father, and she decided to just let him know, or to tell him that her and Jamie are in love and that Tommen nor Joffrey were legitimate heirs to the throne. They are the bastard children of his own children, and Tywin denies it. Now, you and I had discussed before recording this episode. You had major issue with this because you felt that there was no way that Tywin could not know about this.
Yeah. Now this comes from obviously from book stuff, and the fact that we don't have a Tywin POV, so we never really get into his thought process per se. But in the books, it is never confirmed that he knows or not. And I think the consensus is that he possibly knew, but he just didn't bring it to public light. And this actually brings up a whole nother depth to the character of Tywin, and this is going to be interesting to you because I don't think this is anything show watchers would catch on to. And it's that Tywin is an interesting guy in that he's always telling Tyrion, don't bring your whores to court, don't sleep with whores, I'll kill the next whore you sleep with, yada yada. He's always like telling Tyrion not to do this stuff. And it in the end, it almost turns out to be just an image thing. He just doesn't want it to be known that Lannisters sleep with whores because it hurts the family name. But he's hypocritical because Shay is in his bed,
Yes.
and he essentially commits the crime that he was getting on Tyrion's ass about for the entire series. He's been telling Tyrion to stop sleeping with whores the whole time.
Yeah. But the way I read this scene was that Tywin always knew, and he was simply he was denying he was not going to have it. He just kept saying no, no, no because he realized that in acknowledging that his children had birthed the current king, he knew that his power was not legitimate. He is a man who is driven by power, and to this point, he has been, even though he's not sitting on a throne, the most powerful man in Westeros. So if he were to acknowledge that the current king is not the actual heir to, not the actual king, he loses all power. So I read it as in that he was denying because he was not going to acknowledge it because for image reasons and for whatever reasons that were deep down inside him, by acknowledging it, he loses all power. So that's how I read that scene. I thought it played out really well. I know you felt that this episode was somewhat Cersei heavy, but I felt that it worked out really well, at least for a show watcher. just because she did drop that card. And also, as we find out later, this is, I think, going to set up something for next season, and that Cersei realizes the last thing she told her father is that your son, your twin son and daughter, are in love with each other and have bore the children that have taken the throne. She meant it as a way to hurt him, but she will find out that was her last words to him, and it'll probably be devastating to her because she does love her father. She loves her family in a very weird, screwed up way for each family member. It's screwed up in different ways, but it is going. I think it's going to hit Cersei a lot harder. Just the fact that that's the last conversation she had with her father.
And I guess that's one of the good things is that you could kind of interpret that whole thing. You can interpret it. That's a good way to interpret it. That he might have known, he's just in denial, because it is possible. Like I said, it was never confirmed whether he knew or not in the books. So it is interesting that they kind of just laid it on the table like that, and we got his reaction from it. But yeah, another thing I was going to mention about Tywin is that in the books there's a lot of hidden, like Tyrion goes to more lengths to hide that he's sleeping with a whore. And one of the things he does is he tries to hide which whore he's actually visiting. He goes to a brothel, and they have a room that's in there. It's like the executive suite or whatever, and there's a hidden tunnel that goes to another area of the city. And this kind of brings up. You remember how in season 2 or 3, Ross was. Yes. They thought Ross was Tyrion's whore, and the reason that comes up is that Tyrion goes to the brothel to visit that tunnel, and because he's going to the brothel, that's why they get the other whore, not Shay, the first time, because it kind of throws them off. And anyways, that tunnel, the origin of that tunnel, do you know that Tywin used to be Hand of the King?
Yes.
And this was a long time ago when the Targaryens reigned, and one of the ladies there says, yeah, the tunnel was installed by a hand who had he wanted to keep his visits private or something like that. And it basically alludes that Tywin was a whore visitor, that he just kept it very secret. And it makes sense because he ends up with Shay in his bed. So yeah, it's very funny. Like this adds this dynamic to Tyrion and Tywin that Tyrion really is his father's son. They're both
they're far more alike than each one is willing to admit.
Yeah, but yeah, we'll get back to Tyrion and Tywin later. We also get a scene with Cersei coming to Jaime to say, "Hey, look, I love you. Let's get this back together." And Jaime falls right back into her, which I have a problem with. It's another tarnish to Jaime's reputation and his character because he doesn't just fall back to her like that. So.
Yeah, he's completely whipped this season. Like it was, and it was, and the room they were in was, forgive me, what's the name of the room they were in again?
It's the Tower of the Kingsguard, okay. And it's in the, I forgot what the actual chamber is called, but it's the room with the white book, and the white book is the book that records all the deeds of the brothers of the Kingsguard.
And not to mention, he's looking at his page, and it's supposed to be a page that shows the great deeds he's done, and he's reading about himself, and he does this awful deed, and it's kind of, I understand why it was done in the show. I really have no issues with the fact that it was done in the Chamber of the Kingsguard. I mean, it would be something that Jaime wouldn't do, obviously, but obviously in the interest of time and budgets and stuff like that, you just kind of make it happen there because it doesn't make much sense to cut to them in a bedroom that we haven't really been made aware of yet. So but it's just the fact that Jaime just kind of just buckles and just like, okay, I'm with you, Cersei. I love you, and just like it was a little. And Cersei's very powerful. I have no problem with that. Jaime just seems so dynamic at one point, and he's not so much that anymore.
They've kind of like backpedaled with him a bit because the beginning of the season he was kind of concerned with his honor, and he came back with that journey with Brienne, and it changed him in a bit. He started to think about honor and doing the right thing and keeping your word and all that stuff, and now he's kind of like backtracking a bit. I don't know. I don't like the change. I just really don't. I wish that. We'll see where it goes next season. Maybe the writers have a plan for it. We don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I felt like they spent a lot of time on Cersei. They didn't need to, but to each his own. I wish they just would have cut the Jamie scene. Actually, that would have been perfect. If they cut that scene with her and Jamie, I would have been happy.
Yeah.
Let's see who's next on the docket.
Brienne versus the Hound.
Oh, this is a big one. This is a big one.
This is huge.
So this encounter does not even happen in the books, but that being said, I like this fight a lot. It's pretty much a fan service like scene here because it's two very popular characters who've never fought coming together and fighting, and it's a great fight. It's brutal and it's
It's what you would expect from both those characters. I mean, both of them are non-knights, so they have the right to fight as dirty as possible, and they both just want to be the most badass person. And yeah, this fight was going to be ugly, and it sure was.
I take one issue with it. I feel like the showrunners overjudged Brienne's abilities a bit because all right, I'm gonna take a visit back to season 3 where her and Jamie remember Jamie escapes from prison or
Yes.
he's let loose. He's been in prison for a year. He's weak. He's a bit malnourished. He's not but he's been chained up for a year and he's in shackles. And that being said, he's so good at fighting, he still was a threat to Brienne in the books. In the show, Brienne just kind of defeats him kind of easily. Like the way the fight played out, like he fought back, but Brienne like got stabbed, and she probably could have lost to Jamie if things didn't, there was a possibility she could have lost. In the show, they made it seem like she defeated him pretty handily.
Yeah.
So I feel like they overjudged Brienne's abilities. And then now she fights the Hound, and I feel like Hound is one of the top tier fighters. I feel like there's no way she would have beat the Hound.
Well, as I'm watching the fight, I felt that the Hound was getting the upper hand at the end. He just simply ran out of real estate. I mean, they get to the end of the cliff, and I think he very well could have ended up winning that fight because he was pounding the crap out of her. And he simply ran out of room, and it was just whoever was the first one that was going to go over that cliff was going to go, and I think that's sort of what happened. If he had some more room to recover, I think he'd have been fine. But it was still a cool. It was a gruesome. After we saw a fight with Oberyn in the mountain, that was very much sort of by the book. It was nice to see sort of a fight that's just kind of like ground and pound and
blow for blow.
Yeah, just don't have swords, screw it, go fists. It's just don't have tired of using your fists, go rocks.
Kick me in the balls, I'll kick you in the ass. Like he's kicking her in the ass on the floor, and they're biting, clawing each other. He grabs the Valyrian sword, and his hands are probably fucked. But I don't know. It was great. It was a satisfying fight. I had a fear of this scene that Arya was not going to get her farewell scene with the Hound. I really wanted to see this scene, and they included it gratefully. But I also had a fear that we were going to come, when Brienne's calling for Pod and he doesn't show up for a couple times, it takes him a few seconds to react. I was afraid that Arya would have killed Pod with Needle. I was so afraid they were going to do that because I don't want Pod to die.
Yeah.
And that obviously these characters don't meet in the books, so I was like, I hope they don't make that change. Because I don't want Pod to die like this. I don't want Arya to kill Pod either. It's just cruel to put those two people against each other almost. But anyways,
so who does the Hound? Who does the Hound die? Who does the Hound get beat up by in the book?
So the difference is, all right. So this is a problem with, all right. The books have a lot more minor characters. Yeah. There's a lot more minor characters who get more development. Now, do you recall? Basically, it's like this. Arya's death list is a lot longer in the books. She comes across all these Lannister guardsmen that are, that do awful things, and she remembers their names. She wants to remember all these awful people she's met. And one of them is actually in the show. That you remember the Tickler from season 2?
Yes.
He's the guy who tortured people at Harrenhal.
Yes.
He's a little bit. He doesn't die. Like he gets killed in season 2 in the show. Arya has him killed by Jaqen Hagar.
Okay.
He doesn't die in the books at that point. The Tickler, he makes it out, and he's out in the Riverlands still doing his thing, torturing people. So, anyways, what happens is the Hound and Arya go to this inn, and they come across the Tickler, Polliver, who has her needle, and one of their squires in the inn. And a fight breaks out, and the Tickler and Polliver, they team up on the Hound. And between the two of them, they're able to get a few stabs on him. And Arya kills the squire. And what ends up happening, the Hound obviously beats him out, but he takes wounds. And much like in the show, he doesn't brand or cauterize the wound, and so he gets an infection, and he's pretty much dying of an infection from a stab wound in his leg. And Arya and him are just traveling together, and he gets so sick that he just stops by a stream, and that's where this exchange happens. It's not right. It's not like right after the fight. It's like after he's kind of like the wound has worn him down a bit.
And they did the inn earlier in the season, and so that things were kind of playing out in a different timeline, as you had said earlier while we were watching this earlier on in the season we were discussing.
Yep, they've shuffled a lot of things around and combined things. There's just things got moved around a bit. Now, ultimately, this Brienne versus the Hound fight is very satisfying. It's a bit of it's the fight scene of the episode essentially.
Yeah.
The action of the episode, and it gives Brienne something to do. Because otherwise she probably wouldn't have had anything really, at this point in time, anything really important to do. So, Arya and the Hound's farewell plays out essentially almost like it does in the book. So I'm very happy about that. What were your thoughts on the way that played out?
The Hound was wanting to die. He didn't want to die a agonizing death. He wanted to go out quick. And he begins to ask Arya to do it, and he realizes she's just looking at him stone-faced. She's not moving. So I read it as he was trying to do things to incite that rage in her. He said, "I'm just another name on your list. Now you have a chance to cross it off, so do it. Kill me." And so he references the baker's boy, her friend, and he references how he should have raped Sansa, which I don't think he ever really would have. I think he was just saying that in that moment just to try to incite rage in Arya, and it was like a last play of a desperate man, and then Arya just sort of sits there and stares at him, and obviously walks away. And I'm having there are two things that could have played out here. One, that Arya, not that she saw the Hound as like a best friend or anything like that, but that she didn't feel the need. She didn't feel like she could go through with stabbing him in the heart, or her hatred.
Maybe he didn't deserve the mercy.
Yes.
She probably didn't think he deserved it.
Her hatred was so deep for him that she wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of being the name crossed off his list, off her list. She was going to let him just bleed out and die a slow, agonizing death. I don't think we're ever going to really find out. I think it's probably more the latter than the former. But again, it seems sort of weird just because they seem more buddy in recent weeks than not like best friends, but they seem to be more on the positive side of things than a negative side. So I was actually fully expecting her to at one point walk up and stab him in the heart, but it didn't come to pass.
One line they added I was enjoyed a lot. He said something to the fact of, I should have raped your sister, then I would have had one happy memory in my life.
Yes.
I think that's one of the aspects that it's important to realize is that the Hound is a very tragic character. His entire life is a sad story, and I really sympathize with this character. He's one of my favorite characters. And it just really brings it home that he has had a rough life, and he doesn't actually say he wanted to rape Sansa in the books either. But I think he likes Sansa. Like he probably loved her a bit, But
Yeah.
I don't think he ever would have raped her though.
Now he's a ruthless guy, but if he wasn't his brother. There were certain things that he kept different from his brother. Even though he's a bad man, I think he considered himself to be a better man than his brother. And I think those are some lines that he wouldn't cross that his brother would cross. And yeah, I there was that moment in the end of season, well, in the Battle of Blackwater when he told Sansa, "I will, let's go away together." I think he was wanting to play out sort of this fairy tale thing where he takes the pretty girl away from this horrible place, and he can, there were some delusions of grandeur, I'm sure, in his mind. He was drunk in that moment at the Battle of Blackwater, and he was afraid of fire, so he wanted to take this pretty girl away from a place she didn't want to be at, anyways. But yeah, it was a very. I felt sad for him because I did grow to really like this character, and it is sad that he wasn't given in a horrible life. He wasn't given the one thing he should have been given, and that's a swift death. He wasn't given that. Instead, he has to bleed out a slow, agonizing death, and that is sad, and it causes him to be. It continues to make him more of a tragic character.
Yep. And then we'll go. I guess we'll come back to Arya at the end of the episode because she is the end of the season. So let's see. Who else do we have?
We're on to
Daenerys. Let's talk about Daenerys before we forget about her. She was probably the least interesting thing, but it was a good scene actually. I feel like Emilia Clarke actually showed the most range that we've seen in a while.
She's done really well the past few episodes. I think starting with her conversation with Ser Jorah and telling him to leave. I mean, she's actually had a very strong season. Emilia Clarke's done a pretty decent job, even though I don't really love the character all that much. The character's grown on me as the season's gone along, just because she's had a dose of reality. But Emilia Clarke has done good work throughout this season.
So yeah, interesting things come up in her court hearing. She's holding court, and one guy comes up, and he's an old slave. He's been a slave his entire life, and he's like, "Hey, look, ever since you freed me, my life's been shit. I have nowhere to go. I have no home. Young people are just like taking my shit and beating me. Like, I have nothing to do. My life's, you took my life away." Like, he wants the option to be a slave again. It is an interesting. This comes up in the books, where people, they've become accustomed to that life, and some of them want it. Like, and so she is, kind of guilted into allowing for contracts to be made, which kind of opens. And in I think Barristan says it. He's like, yeah, the slavers will take advantage of this. They'll see it as a loophole, and now you're going to have all these contracts be drawn up. Essentially, that's what he says. So it's a good point, and I think it kind of gives us a little peek of what we could see in the future.
Her idealistic utopian society cannot actually exist, unfortunately for her. And also, there was looking into the loophole. She said a contract can't exceed 1 year. Well, what's to stop a slaver from having somebody sign a long line of 1 year contracts? I mean, there are different things you could do there. It's pretty vague.
Oh yeah. Yeah, so, I mean, then the next guy comes up, and the dragons have killed their first human. Well, wildly killed their first human, outside of her command. And, it's like, it's another thing that just destroys her utopian ideal that she would be a just ruler and everything would be peachy dory, and, like, everything would be just peachy and things would just be perfect. And the dragons are flying out on their own. They're let loose. And she realizes, if these dragons are loose, they're only going to get bigger, and they're only going to get hungrier. And they're going to start killing people. So she takes it upon herself to lock. Well, Drogon is just off on his own, doing his own thing. He's huge. He's temperamental. And he's just doing his thing.
Yeah, Drogon's the one we saw attack the sheep herd earlier in the season, right? Or the goat or sheep herd there at the beginning of the season.
He is.
He looked massive compared to his dragon brothers. Is he significant? Is he supposed to be significantly larger than the other two?
He is the largest.
Yeah, because he was massive. Because that moment when he comes up from the other side of the hill, it was jaw dropping how large he was. And then you see I don't know the names of the green and the red one, but they're significantly smaller than him. I mean, they're bigger than Danny, but they're not like the size that he was.
Yeah, no, there's a size difference. Um, one sec. Anyways, so what we come to, she has to chain them up, and this happens in the books too. She chains up Viserion and Rygel, and she puts them. She has to chain them up, and this is mentioned in the books too. I don't know if it's been mentioned in the show, but there's actually a conversation between Jorah and Barristan and Daenerys, and it's about raising dragons. And Barristan essentially says, he's like, look, the dragons of old times, a couple hundred years back in the age of old Valyria, they would grow to be huge enough to pick up krakens out of the sea. Like, they were gigantic, like huge. But the dragons that, before the dragons went extinct, the ones that were raised in King's Landing, they had a building called the Dragon Pits that was built in King's Landing, and it's essentially where the Targaryens kept and raised their dragons during their reign of the Seven Kingdoms. And Barristan goes on to say that dragons who are raised in captivity don't grow as large as the dragons who roam free. So the dragons of King's Landing, they came out smaller than a lot of the more renowned dragons. So I think Dany, knowing this, she wants to keep her people safe, and she doesn't want the dragons just roaming free and wreaking havoc. So she chains up Rygel and Viserion, and yeah.
And I did not know all this backstory, so I actually, be honest, I nearly teared up because I thought she was putting them into a crypt. That's what I thought she was doing. I thought she was chaining them up. She realized she had one dragon left, and he was out doing his own thing. And I was worried that because she was tearing up and crying, and I thought, oh man, she's gonna kill these things. She's just gonna let them. She didn't have she does. But then again, I imagine if she was gonna kill them, she would give them more of a swift death. She wouldn't have them starve to death. Yeah, in a crypt.
Yeah, no, I don't. I guess it is true. It's left open ended that way, and maybe show actors could interpret that way. I hope I didn't ruin someone's day by talking about that, but.
Yeah, maybe they're like we can kill off two of these, save some budget. All right, let's put them in a crypt.
We only have to animate one dragon now.
This is so much better now, easier.
But yeah, no, her intent is not to kill them. It's to keep them under control so that they're not just flying out eating everybody.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a good scene. You're right. It is very sentimental. That I think she's sad that she has to lock her children up.
That, and also it's another a chink in the armor of this idealistic society where she thought her dragons could just roam free, everybody would be happy, she would just parade into King's Landing with these giant dragons, and everybody would just bow and say, we want you as queen. And as time goes on, she's losing more and more of what her vision was.
She's having to make the tough decisions now.
Yes.
She's realizing the hardships of ruling.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that's about all that happened in Daenerys' plot. I saw a funny comment on the internet about this. Someone was like, "Thank God we didn't have to They were talking about how the time in the episode was utilized, and there's things that had to be cut out, etc." And one scene that I'll talk about briefly that I was anticipating. But someone on the internet's like, I'm glad we didn't have to spend a couple minutes watching Grey Worm and Missandei scissor each other or something. I'm like, that's ridiculous. I don't know. I just thought it was funny he mentioned that.
That's next season.
That's next season. Yeah. So let's move on to the Bran in the North. We finally get some payoff for this plot line. I'm sure a lot of the show watchers are like, where's this going? So yeah. What are your thoughts on all this? Because this is a huge scene to take in. It's pretty crazy.
Well, he's had these visions of the Three-Eyed Crow since the first season, and since I guess season 3, he's had the visions of the White Tree. Right? I would say that's from season 3. I don't think he had it prior to then.
Yeah. I think that's right.
But they've been journeying to this place. It's all visions. Uh, I didn't know if it was metaphor, if it was actually going to be literal things. We do find out that the White Tree is a literal place. But when we get there, it's like a frozen lake bed around it, and there are whites hiding underneath, and Jojen is grabbed, and a battle ensues. And in this moment, we do see Bran take over Hodor again, which when Bran's inside Hodor's body, he becomes a pretty efficient killer. It's pretty impressive to watch Hodor when he suddenly got focus and some confidence. It's fun to watch.
It's badass. I love that. I love that aspect of the story that Bran takes over Hodor's body like that.
Yeah, they're like two halves that make an amazing whole.
There's a quote in the books too, and it's a big foreshadowing quote too. There's things like this that make the books beautiful to me. This was foreshadowed in the very beginning of the books after Bran is crippled and he's talking to his Maester Luwin, and he's like, "Will I ever be a knight?" You know, he wants to be a knight. That's like his dream. He wanted to be a knight, and he's talking like I guess the reality setting that he has no legs, he will never walk again. And he's like, "Is there any way I can ever be a knight?" He's like, "What if you mount me on Hodor's shoulders and I fight on Hodor's back?" And Maester Luwin says something like this. He's like, "In order to be a knight, your mind and body must be one. You can't have two different people, like, and it can't be an efficient knight." I forgot the exact quote to it, but he says this in book 1, and then as the story unfolds, Bran is controlling Hodor's body, so he is a knight. Like, he can be. Well,
Yeah.
like, he is a fighter. He could do these things, but he can't use his body though. But yeah, it's pretty cool. And so yeah, this battle unfolds, and it's pretty crazy, man. I don't know. I was so happy to see this on screen. Like, it's just some cool stuff. There's a lot of stuff that's different, and I can go over that shortly. But yeah, Jojen being killed. What are your thoughts on this?
I've actually probably reading stuff that's written by people who are just strictly show watchers. There hasn't been a real connection to Jojen. Obviously, Jojen and Mira, they're not as big as they are in the books, but I have felt sort of this connection to Jojen Jojen and Mira just being that they have been so loyal to Bran on his journey, and like I said during a Weekend at Craster's, Jojen's visions. I'm going to continue to call Weekend at Craster's. I'm sorry.
That's like the perfect thing, dude. I love calling it Weekend at Craster's.
It's wonderful. I'm so glad you gave me that. But yeah, during Weekend at Craster's, when Jojen is revealing these things he sees, it sort of made sense because Jojen is weak. He can't fend for himself. And I knew in that moment when he was grabbed, I was hoping he wasn't going to get killed, but I thought it was a pretty strong possibility that he wasn't going to make it out of this battle. I mean, there had to be some casualty. It was either going to be him or sadly Hodor, and it ended up being Jojen.
I wanted to put this out there, is that Jojen is not dead in the books yet.
Oh.
So killing Jojen, they have this joke going around the community now, is that, that meme about Jojen, he's the saver of the books, like, he's like, hey, we're not supposed to be doing this. Doesn't happen in the books. We need to go this way. You remember how they had that meme?
Yes.
So they killed the guy who's trying to keep him on track in the books. It's just like, it was funny. I don't know. Like, they're making a big joke about it. But no, there is a serious debate now as to where Jojen's fate is concerned, and obviously he said, even in the show, he knows the day he dies. He's seen his death in a vision. So when they were even talking about going to Weekend at Craster's, like, this is too dangerous. Why are we doing this? And he's like, don't worry, this is not where I die. He had confidence because he knows that's not where he dies, so that they went along with it.
Yeah.
And anyways, yeah. So people are questioning Jojen's fate in the books as far as how he dies, because it is confirmed that I guess he dies. So
this show, man, it's taking some detours from your books. It's actually sort of worrying me a bit, but anyways, we'll continue on. And then we see a girl come out of the cave underneath the tree and start throwing some grenades.
Man, all right, so big. I have a problem with this. Her using those fireballs, that doesn't happen in the books. So to me, it's kind of like for a moment there, in the way she looks, I was like, man, am I watching like Narnia or something?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. It kind of took me out a bit. I didn't care. The fireballs look cool. They weren't they were cheesy or anything.
And it was a
Well,
convenient way of getting them to the cave. I mean, there's no way that Bran, Mira, and Hodor were going to make it to the cave if they didn't have some help from somebody else.
all right, now here's the thing that bothers me is the makeup of the girl and the makeup of the three-eyed raven. I feel like they really cut corners here. All right, so the girl. What do you know? What do you think of this girl?
I think she's
What do you think she's just a human child?
no.
Okay.
I
What,
think
what,
she's been around for a long time.
okay. So it's supposed to be evident that she is one of the children of the forest.
Okay.
Do you remember much about the children of the forest? Like they've been mentioned.
Um, I've heard of it. I don't remember when they were mentioned though.
So just a little like brief history. The children of the forest were basically a race of people who are older than men. They're like a very old race. In I guess for intents and purposes, they're kind of like the elves of this world
Okay.
because they're a nature like people. They're the ones who used to use. They used to see visions in Green Sea, and they knew magic. And they were the ones who carved the faces on the heart trees.
Okay.
So they were thought to be extinct throughout the wars of time. Um, and so yeah, she's a child of the forest, and it just shows us they're still around. There's some of them still around. So she's supposed to look more like nature-like. Like they describe them as having like leafy, like kind of like leaves in their hair, and kind of like when Bran looks at her, she looks young and she looks like a child, but just by looking in her eyes, he could tell that she's wise beyond anything he's ever met before.
Okay.
Like that kind of. So her makeup's not so bad, but when we get to the three-eyed raven, dude, he doesn't look anything like I would expect him to look. Um,
Oh, before we go into them, I want to mention when they walked in, I thought we were entering a set from True Detective. I thought we were entering. I guess I should know. I'm not going to say anything else, but you know what I mean, just in
yeah,
case anybody who hadn't seen True Detective. But I was pretty darn sure we were entering a set from True Detective. I was just thinking, oh man, they're saving some budget here. Nice, nice.
reuse that set. Yeah, no, but the actual set looks about the way it looks in the books.
Okay.
The roots everywhere and all these skulls and bones. Oh, I gotta say one effect I did like was how they ran in the cave and the Draugr or whatever the whites, they just kind of run and they explode on the doorway like that.
Yes.
I thought that was a really cool effect because that is in the books. That entrance is warded to protect against those whites.
Okay.
So it's like a spell, and they can't enter that cave. And so I thought that was a cool effect how they ran in and just like that was cool.
It was nice. It was a nice little touch.
All right, one thing it's time to mention because it is confirmed that this didn't happen, and I don't think we're gonna ever see it, and I think it's for budget reasons. One very interesting thing that was left out of Bran's plot to this point, he was supposed to meet another character on his way north, and this character is very interesting. He's basically this hooded character with like black like frozen hands. They never see his face. His name is Cold Hands, and he rides a giant elk, like a
Okay.
huge giant elk, and he kind of protects Bran and them and guides them to this cave in the books. He was sent by the three-eyed raven,
Okay.
and he's cut out from all this. I think it's because of budget reasons. I don't think they wanted to have the giant elk. That's the only thing I can think of.
Well, they could have
But
gotten away with it without the elk. I mean, I feel like that would have been a good thing, just because it would have been like, okay, this three-eyed raven's is powerful and is anticipating Bran, so he sends somebody to protect them. That would have been sort of nice.
he has some really cool quotes too. Like I think like the three-eyed raven is actually talking through him, And they're like, "What are you?" And he's like, "Are you some kind of monster?" And he goes, "Yes, I am. I'm your monster, Brandon Stark." And like, I don't know, he's just a really cool guy. Like, he's very mysterious. People wonder who he is. Um, but anyways, he's there and he kicks some ass in that fight. He should have been there in that fight fighting the whites, and he actually helps them get in there. So I kind of prefer that they probably should have had him there instead of the fireballs, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's absent from the show, I guess. Um, I just wanted to bring that up because I've been waiting. That was one reveal I was hoping to see in like season 2 or 3. He's actually the one who saves Sam Tarly in the books.
Oh.
You remember when Sam Tarly kills the White
Yeah,
Walker?
stabs him with the the
You remember how all those ravens or those crows or ravens are like
yes.
flocking around there?
Yes.
The three-eyed raven and Cold Hands are the one who save him with
Oh.
through the ravens and through the Cold Hands being there. So
Would have been a nice little touch to have that character wandering around.
yeah. So I don't know, just little things there.
Yeah.
Uh, and so yeah, three-eyed raven. We meet this guy, and now this is the problem. This is one of the big problems I have with him. In the show, he looks like an 50 or 60-year-old man, like zip tied onto a tree. That's all he looks like. Like,
Yeah.
is that what you got to? Like, so disappointing to me. Like, actually, do I have my calendar? Let me get my calendar. I'm going to show you what it looks like in the books. I have
Okay.
the Song of Ice and Fire calendar. Let me grab it.
But yeah, no, I'll continue to. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting to see the character because as a show watcher, I knew nothing of this character going into it. But yeah, to see just sort of a an elderly man uncomfortably, an elderly man uncomfortably hanging in a tree was sort of an odd. I don't know. I just wasn't getting a sense of a guy who's very powerful. It just seems so awkward.
Yeah, all right, so this is what he should look like. This is what he looks like in the books. He's basically an ancient guy who's grown into the tree,
Okay. Okay.
and the roots grow all through him. There's actually a root growing through one of his eyes, but he looks like he's beyond like he's just like crusty old and he can't move. Like that's how old he is. But versus the guy in the show looks kind of like he's like some average 50-year-old healthy man, you know?
Yeah, let's say it's cast like that day. They're like, "Oh, we'll go cast some 56-year-old guy to come in and play this part." Hey,
Yeah.
do you want to?
Yeah,
Yeah, you know,
yeah, my grandpa's got nothing going on. You think he could be in the show? Like,
yeah.
like.
Go ahead and bring him in. Bring him in.
So I don't know. I was hoping for a better like. I wanted him to look creepier. Like I wanted him to look like almost like something out of Pan's Labyrinth. You know?
Yeah,
I don't know.
budget
But
man, budget.
that budget though.
Yeah, that budget though.
Overall, I enjoyed it though. I like seeing Brand's stuff come to this point because his chapters are immensely interesting to me. Like even before he gets here, they're interesting to me. But this is where they just kind of like take off. It's just gonna be crazy.
Speaking of takeoff, the three-eyed crows tells him that that Bran will learn things that he wants to be able that he desires to be able to do, and it's not walking. He will learn how to fly. So I'm assuming that's metaphor, but it'd be interesting to see where that leads to next season.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Very interesting things. I guess we could move on to Tyrion now.
Yes, yes, yes.
So, lots to talk about here. Tyrion, he's woken up in his cell at night. Jaime is letting him go. Did you expect that? I'm pretty sure you did, huh?
Yeah, I kind of saw that coming. I mean, well, I actually didn't know how Tyrion was going to get out of this, and this is brought up by people who watch the show. It seems like if Jaime was going to do this, he could have done this earlier. But I think something that saves that from being the obvious outcome is that I think Jaime thought for sure that he'd get his brother out of it prior to this, prior to him actually being sentenced to death. I think Jaime was confident that there was a way out of this. His brother's going to be fine. I think he only resorted to this once he realized that there was no other possible way of saving his brother. He had to break him out of jail.
Yeah. So, yeah, he gets him out. Now, this is where there's kind of an issue. We talked about this in the past, the whitewashing of certain characters.
Yes.
And Tyrion, Daenerys, and Jon Snow, they're all kind of like whitewashed in the show. Like none of their negative aspects are shown on the screen. I feel like great lengths are taken to make these characters look as good as possible, at least in my opinion. And I've seen a lot of people online agree with that. And this is one of those scenes because um, Tyrion and Tysha, his previous wife, that is a big deal to him. She was his first love, and just to remind everybody, the story with that is they were married. Jamie and him saved her from rapists, and she spent time with Tyrion, fell in love with him, and they married. They eloped pretty much. Anyways, it turns out that Tywin and Jamie then tell him, no, she's not a crofter's daughter. She's a whore. She only married you for your money, and she used you pretty much. And so that's what they use to basically nullify the marriage, and they do horrible things to Tysha, and they toss her out on her ass, and Tyrion doesn't do anything to save her or change her fate. So, anyways, what all becomes of this is it's at this point when when Jamie is breaking Tyrion out, he basically says, "Hey, I have to come clean with you, Tyrion, because this might be the last time I ever see you again. I just wanted you to know that I lied to you." He says that Father told me that I was to tell you that Tysha was a whore, but it was a lie. She really was a crofter's daughter, and it's like it kind of hits Tyrion really hard that she really did love him. He had true love there. It was real, but his father destroyed it, and it just hits him like a ton of bricks because it's a core aspect to his character that's all he really wants in life is for someone to truly love him. Because he is a dwarf, everybody thinks he's some evil guy, or no one wants to be friends with a dwarf, or no one wants to love a dwarf, and so it tears him up inside that he had true love and his father destroyed it, and that is his motivation for going to his father's chambers. And so without that dialogue, in a lot of people's mind, there's no motivation for him to go up there. I don't know. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I was a little confused when he walked up the steps. I actually thought for a moment, well, initially I thought, oh, he's going in to kill his father, and then I see a woman's body in the bed, and I'm like, oh, is he going to kill his sister? Like I didn't know exactly what was going on, and then you hear Shay's voice, and I was like, oh, and she calls out Tywin's name, and I was like, okay, this is an odd little twist at a very last, because I do occasionally, especially in something that seems like it's going to take a whole lot longer than it seems that the time is allotted. I check the time, and I'm like, oh crap, there's only like 7 minutes left in this episode. There's no way they're about to just unveil something huge like this out of nowhere. And that's what they did, and I was just like, okay, this seems a little. And of course, he kills Shay, and I understood why. I mean, he was angry. It was a passionate kill. He was hurting because this is a woman that he loved, and he finds her laying in bed. But I started to think, well, was Shay involved from the very beginning? Which wouldn't make a whole lot of sense because, as you said, as we've discussed, their emotions were genuine. They did genuinely love each other, and it probably did come down to broken communication between, Tyrion telling Shay that he wanted her, he didn't love her anymore. He was trying to get her just to leave the kingdom, but instead he caused her to feel incredibly spurned, and she testified against him. But it was, yeah, I thought it was a little rushed. I thought it came off a little. It was a little. It just didn't come off right. It didn't come off very smooth. It's for a person who hadn't read the books, it felt tacked on.
Yeah, well, it's a little different. Obviously, Shay is a very different character in the books. So this is what I was talking about, the whitewashing of Tyrion. They didn't have. So him and Jamie actually have a falling out because of what Jamie tells him. Tyrion Oh man, this is a good one. So I'm going to talk about this Jamie thing, and then I'm going to talk about Shay, just to show you the whitewashing part of what I'm talking about. So when Jamie reveals this truth about Taisha to him, it angers him and it stirs up all these emotions. And at that point, he in his point of view, he's like, I don't give a fuck anymore. Like he's like, Jamie, I never want to see you again. Like you're an asshole. I can't believe you did that to me. What he says all this stuff to him. And then Jamie asks one last question. He's like, so I have to ask you one more thing. He's like, did you really kill Joffrey? And Tyrion did not kill Joffrey, and he said it before. But he's so angry at Jamie in an attempt to hurt him. He's like, yes, I killed Joffrey. I fucking murdered him, whatever. And he at that point, he doesn't even care what people think about him. He just says that he killed Joffrey for no reason. So Tyrion and Jamie part ways, and there's a conflict between them. But that doesn't happen here, obviously. And
Right.
it's probably a minor thing. I mean, in the scheme of the plot overall, it's probably a subplot. But it's still like, I don't know, it's something petty that Tyrion does, and they take away that pettiness, and I don't know. It's the whitewashing of the character, essentially. And then the same thing when he goes to kill Shay. Shay pulls a knife out on him before he comes to her. And so his killing of Shay in this episode is semi-self-defense. And that doesn't happen that way in the book. In the books, he's so angry to find Shay in his father's bed that he just murders her in cold blood. Like, he straight up murders her in cold blood. And it's definitely a darker side of Tyrion that we don't see in the show here, because he did it in self-defense in the show. But in the books, he does some vengeful things. Like, when he's angry with someone, he could do things like this.
But also in the books, it's from his point of view, right? The stuff
Yep.
that's going on is so you can be inside his head and be with his reasoning or his lack of reasoning in those moments. Well, I think if in the show, if that were the case, again, it is whitewashing. But say we close out this season with him brutally, just cold-blooded killing Shay and then cold-blooded killing his father. I think he'd be viewed as a villain going into next season. I'm not exactly sure. I don't know if you'd waste all the goodwill. So I understand why it happens, but again, it's just one of those things that gets chalked up to the fact that we just don't get as much time with these characters as we do in the books.
Yeah. But yeah, you might be right. But yeah, it does show, like, Tyrion is not 100%. Like, everybody is shades of gray in these stories,
Yes.
And like I said, it's just a little minor thing I have. I still think the story will be fine on TV and everything. It's just something, little quibble I had.
Right, and I could understand where that comes from, and to be honest, I do feel that Tyrion, Daenerys, and Jon Snow do, in a world where gray keeps you alive, they do seem to be a little too white in this world. So yeah, I do agree, it is a bit whitewashed.
Yeah, and so yeah, he proceeds to find Tywin in the privy.
Yes.
And the dialogue's changed a little bit, but the scene pretty much plays out about the same. Except for he only does one crossbow bolt in the books instead of two. So, but yeah, either way, he kills Tywin on the privy. What was your reaction to this scene?
At first when it occurred, it's like I knew that I knew Tywin was gonna die. I'm like, they're closing out this episode. There's no way he's coming out of this alive. Also, I found it sort of ironic that a man who desired to be on the Iron Throne was being killed on the Porcelain Throne. It just seems somewhat ironic that would be the case. He did die. He did eventually make it to a throne, or he would be known for being on a throne, but it was the wrong one. But yeah, I actually felt it played out a little longer than I thought it would. Tywin was Tywin to the very end. He didn't beg for his life or anything like that. He just basically said, Tyrion, put the crossbow down. We can go to my chamber and we can discuss this. But I thought it was sort of funny that Tywin would be. I mean, it was not begging, but it was sort of like this denial of the fact that his son that he's sentenced to death is standing there with a crossbow, and he thinks they can tell his son that, oh yeah, we're just gonna go back to my chamber where you killed, your the woman that you loved and I was sleeping with, and we're just gonna have to sit down and have a nice little conversation about this. I was never really gonna kill you. Let's just go ahead and discuss this. It's like the same time, it's like I don't see where Tyrion's really going to buy into that. I mean, if you go back to his chamber, you call in the King's Guard, and that's the end of it for Tyrion. But it was interesting. It was also bittersweet in the fact that this was the end of Charles Dance and Peter Dinklage's back and forth. That's the last time we'll see it in the show. And it's a real shame, just because that has been a major highlight of this series. These two actors kind of going at it, and
It's gonna be. It's sad that we're gonna lose Charles Dance, and I knew it was coming. But he did a great job. Charles Dance. He is Tywin in my head. Like when I think of Tywin now, it's him I think about.
Yeah. It's it hasn't really hit me yet. I'm somewhat in denial. It's not gonna hit me until next season when we roll into season 5 and he's no longer part of the cast. Like I think that's when it's gonna hit me. Like, man, Charles Dance is gone, and my only experience with him, this is a little bit of a tangent, but my only experience with him was Last Action Hero prior to this movie. That's the only thing I'd seen him in. And he was great in Last Action Hero. It's not a great movie. It's pretty corny, but he was great in it. And when I saw him on screen, he has the first time I saw him in the show, I bought into it. He has such a presence about him. Yeah, one of the best characters I've ever seen on television. Just it's the way it goes in the books, and it makes complete sense that Tywin was going to die at some point, and I don't mean of old age. I mean he was going to be killed by somebody at some point. He was going to piss off somebody enough that an assassination attempt was going to occur. I was shocked it happened, but I wasn't incredible. I wasn't like completely floored by it. It made sense. And part of that comes from the fact that we've been conditioned in this storyline that nobody's safe, no matter how powerful you are. Nobody's safe, and even the most powerful man in Westeros wasn't safe because he got killed on the pot. So, yeah, it's sad. It's extremely bittersweet, and then, like I said, it's not going to completely hit me until next season.
And the man who runs the kingdom, and he's such a ruthless reputation. And it's something about, all these plans he had and all these tactics he was employing, and he ran that kingdom pretty well for what, he ran it well for the Lannisters. But what does him in is how he mistreated his children that ended it,
Yeah.
Like, yeah, he didn't have his family in order, I guess. He didn't have that genuine father relationship with them. He was all business.
Yeah, for a man who said family was the most important thing, by the end of this episode, all 3 of his children had turned on him in some way, shape, or form. Jaime had turned on him long ago by not being in the heir.
Yep, and by going behind his back to release Tyrion from his punishment.
Yes, you had Cersei tell him to his face that I am sleeping with my brother, I'm in love with my brother. So she had turned on her father, and of course Tyrion had not been, him and his father had not been seeing eye to eye since season 2, or even before that. But I mean, season 2 was that Battle of Blackwater was the moment that was the straw that broke the camel's back in their relationship.
Mm-hmm. But yep, then Tyrion meets up with Varys, and Varys is like, "What have you done?" So yeah, Varys packs him up in his little box and puts him on a ship, and yeah, the bells start tolling, and he's like, "Oh, I can't go back," so he hops on the ship.
Well, it's funny when Varys says, "What have you done?" There is that sort of, I was thinking, "Oh man, what does this mean for Varys?" And then I thought, well, he's pretty slick. He could probably still get out of this, but it's in that moment when the bell tolls, he realizes there is no way he's going to get out of this, because the fact is, he was the one that was trusted by Jaime to take his brother out of King's Landing. So in this time between Jaime's saying goodbye to Tyrion and Tyrion getting on that ship, his father was killed, and there's only 2 possibilities in that situation, as Tyrion and Varys. And Varys was not going to be safe going back in that kingdom. He would probably be the one that would be blamed for the murder of Tywin Lannister. So, yeah, just that look of Varys is not. Varys is an extremely great character, but you had to kind of feel bad for him because he had built up so much and it came all crashing down in that one moment. So I'm sure he'll land on his feet. He's a spider. He'll do fine, but he has to delay his plans of ruling a kingdom for a little while longer.
This is different than how it plays out in the books because Varys doesn't get on the ship with Tyrion. He stays in King's Landing, but he goes into hiding.
Okay.
So it's a little bit different. I think they're doing this to keep Conolith Hill in the spotlight and to keep him with Tyrion for a little while longer, so that they can act. We get more of Conolith Hill and Tyrion because they are great together. I like seeing them on the screen together.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah. In the absence of Charles Dance, we need to have some more back and forth banter for Peter Dinklage. You need somebody to go tit for tat for him. Yeah.
I didn't pay attention, or maybe I missed it. But did they mention where they were going?
Not that I recall.
Okay. Do you have any guesses as to where they're going?
Whew. Bravos.
Okay.
Bravos.
I was just curious. I just wanted to know what your thoughts were on that.
I mean, that's where Varys comes from, the other side of the Narrow Sea, right?
Yeah, he does come from the Essos. Yeah, he comes from over there.
And I don't think they're going to the Vale.
No, no, the Vale is in Westeros still.
Yeah.
But Varys is from Essos. I'm not gonna tell you where they're going. I just kind of wanted to gauge you and see what you thought.
Ooh, ooh,
But
ooh.
yeah, that's fine.
Oh no. I think I might know. I'm gonna predict it's where where they're either going to Dorne or they're going to where where Marjorie's from, the Tyrells. I mean, those are two
High Garden.
possibilities. High Garden. You either got High Garden or you got Dorne. Those are two possibilities.
Good guesses. Yep. We'll see you next season, but
Yeah.
I just wanted to gauge you on that and see what you thought.
All right.
Yeah, and the season ends with Arya. She uses the coin that Jaqen Hagar gave her, and she says Valor Morgalis, and she finds Bravosian shipwrights, and like Jaqen Hagar said, is when you're ready to find me, bring this coin to any Bravosi and tell him this words. And that's what he told her, and
They
she's.
they knew right away. They said that they not only they say they give her passage, but she had her own cabin, right?
Yeah, they're like, you'll have your cabin. So, yep. Arya wants to go seek out Jaqen Hagar.
Big things, man, big things. And as I texted you after I watched the show last night, I said that the board has been cleared,
Hmm.
and you had told me that the first three seasons were building up for season four. Granted, they are setting things up for next season, but the world as we knew it has been completely wiped clean, and we're starting over with something nearly completely new. We have Stannis in the north. We
Hmm.
have Tywin dead. We have Littlefinger
In the Vale.
in the Vale. We have the Boltons lording over the north. And we have Tommen on the throne. And we have Tyrion heading off to who knows where. And
And Tywin is dead, and you
yes,
have to imagine the political ramifications of this, because he is the brains of the Lannister family. He's Tommen is just a boy on the throne, but Tywin was the one pulling all the strings.
like who's gonna be the hand of the king now? Like that's a big deal. Who's gonna be? That's it's it's gonna be next season is gonna be incredibly interesting.
And the question is, who will rule? Who will rule now? Because Tywin's gone, and Tyrion's gone too. Those were the two most tactical people who were in charge there. They're both gone from King's Landing. So you have to imagine, like, just the ramifications of just those two people being gone alone. It's pretty hefty.
Man,
So much to look forward to, man.
and we got a whole year. This is awful. This is awful, man.
Yeah. Yep. So yeah, I gotta say, and the internet's blowing up over this. I don't know if you've seen articles and mentions of it on the internet. People are upset that the scene I'm talking about didn't make it in the show. Did you see
Yeah,
that?
this is something you've been I've not seen anything. I've tried. I've accidentally stumbled into some spoilers, so I try to actively not seek them out. Um,
And
but
it's a good thing you are avoiding these because I've seen like Entertainment Weekly and a couple others that are openly writing about this, like, oh, they didn't include this such and such scene, and I'm like, man, why are they spoiling it? Like, and here's the problem I have with it. I thought this scene I'm talking about was going to be the end of last season, and it wasn't. I thought it was going to be the end of this season, and it wasn't. And the thing is that everybody agrees this the way it's a perfect scene to end a season because it's a huge shock. It's a what the fuck moment, and it just kind of like it makes you question like everything. You're like, what the hell is going on? And it would just leave everybody like wanting more, and it would have been like the biggest like crazy ending for a TV show. Like it was just a perfect scene to use, and everybody was so certain they were going to use it, and they didn't use it.
now, is it something they could use next season, or have we kind
Yeah,
of gone past? Okay,
I have a feeling that they wanted to focus on what they had built up already, and have the finale, and then I imagine next season one of the earlier episodes will probably end with that cliffhanger.
okay,
And what bothers me about it is that it it would have been the perfect opportunity, and then they even trolled us with it too because when they have Arya on the ship, screen goes black, and it goes black. It went black for like 5 seconds. It was like a long black, and I
yeah.
was like, okay, it's gonna fade back into this. And they didn't do it. And I'm like, oh, why? And then I even waited until after the credits. I'm like, they're gonna put it after the credits, and they
I did.
still.
I watched all the way to the end of the credits because you've been teasing me with this. I thought, well, they're surely not going to end this season without this thing that should have ended through season three, but they did.
Yeah, and I was like, man, really? Like, and everybody's saying the same thing is that it's all over the internet right now. Like, be careful what you read. I've seen several articles, like from like Entertainment Weekly, a couple others that they're spelling it out, and I'm like, don't. Why are they doing that? Like, the show missed the opportunity to do it. Now, a lot of people are being spoiled by reading about the backlash of not doing it.
Yeah.
So yeah. I anticipate we will see it early next season. It would not make sense for them to not put it in early next season.
Okay. And it's something that has to be shown.
I don't see how they can not show it
Okay.
because not only is it something crazy and something unexpected, but it's important to multiple characters' plot lines.
Okay.
Like it's almost defining of several plot lines, and I'm like, why this? There's no way they can like leave this out. And there are things that have happened in the show that let us know that hey, this is coming. Like there's things that have like been shown that will allude to this, and
Okay.
when you see it and after it's been explained a little bit, you'll be like, oh my god, like it'll come together.
Okay.
So yeah, it's just a big upset thing. I mean, honestly, it'll be fine showing it next season, and people will get a quicker, it'll be the cliffhanger, and then they'll only have to wait a week to see what's going on instead of
Okay.
cliffhanger now, because it's almost borderline cruel if they do it this way. But I guess I kind of wanted that cruelty
Yeah.
because, yeah, I don't know, you know what I'm talking about.
It left people talking and wanting to anxiously awaiting next season.
Yep. So yeah,
Well,
man, what a season, right?
what a season. You told me it was going to be the best, and it sure was. And maybe I'm speaking hyperbolic. I don't think so, but this may have been the best season of television I've ever watched. I've not watched as much television as some people I know, but this has definitely been a treat to go through.
It's been a great ride. Lots of great stuff. Yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to next season. I anticipate there will be lots of. They'll be surpassing the books in many ways next season, I think.
Yeah, and then being that you've said they've changed things pretty drastically, it sounds like between the books and the TV show, I think it stands. It can be reasoned that we will blow past the books next season.
It seems like every season, like they're shaving more and more off each season. You know,
Yeah,
like book one was pretty close. I mean, season one was pretty close to books, and as it's going on, they've just kept shaving. It's like they're just carving off layers. You know, but it's fine. And the stuff they add, sometimes I really like it. Like the Hound and Brienne, I thought that was awesome. It
yeah.
was a fun little fight. Um, but yeah, I mean, we'll be back next week. We'll be talking something other than Game of Thrones. We still haven't decided what that is yet, but we will be back next week. We'll record on something else. We will do a season 4 recap at some point in the future, probably leading up to season 5, because we will do a rewatch and then we'll talk about season 4 again. So that'll come later in the future. But yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and plug check out altness.com, guys. Me and Jordan could be seen there in several of our other videos, and we do other content there. So go ahead, feel free to check us out. And yeah, that's it for this Game of Thrones discussion this year. I'm completely down to do this next year if you are, Jordan.
Of course I am.
Yeah, I mean,
This has been far too much fun.
yeah, and it's good to just kind of recap things, and I like hearing your perspective, especially like to see to see your perspective. It's fun to vicariously live through your fresh interpretation of it, you know.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm glad I can provide that for you.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, yeah, I'll see you next week, and yeah, everybody tune in next week. We'll be talking some other topics, and yeah, have a good weekend. This is Brian and Jordan, and we'll see you guys next week.